Dear Naruto Lemon fans, I'm thrilled to invite all of you to my Boosty channel, where you can enjoy exclusive Naruto Lemon scenes in a comfortable and supportive community. Choose from various subscription tiers, from Mini Lemon to God Lemon, and gain access to unique content tailored just for our fans. Plus, subscribers to over Naruto Lemon and God Lemon will receive special mentions in my videos. Support my channel and dive deeper into the world of Naruto today. Dare. Look, isn't that Uzumaki Naruto sitting under the tree? That's right, he's just a bit nervous, and what's he doing in the Hyuga district anyway? The Konoha gossips whispered among themselves, always interested in the lives of celebrities like Naruto. They say he's been showing up here a lot lately, maybe he's waiting for someone, the girl whispered, pressing her lips ever closer to her companion's ear, glancing around to make sure no one had overheard the gossip about the local hero. I saw him greet a Hyuga girl near Ichiraku. It seems like it was recently, she said, still glancing at the subject of their conversation, who was darting back and forth. The blonde man stood at the entrance to the Hyuga residence, smiling awkwardly at the clansmen of his brunette friend who passed by. They cast him skeptical glances and went off to their own business. Uzumaki twitched his eyebrows, scratched the back of his head, and couldn't bring himself to enter this area. The nine-tailed fox's Jinchuriki was starting to irritate himself with his behavior and indecision. He kicked a small pebble with the toe of his sandal, shoved his hands into his pockets, and instantly pushed off with his feet, landing only on the roof of a building behind a fence. He was already in enemy territory, there was no turning back, any Hyuga sensor would detect an intrusion in a second. He had wandered into this area many times before, but only now did it evoke a storm of conflicting emotions within the blonde. What was he doing here? Why was everything so unsettling? These emotions even irritated the boy a little, especially the confusion of his heart. This shouldn't be happening. But he knew he wanted to be here and now. Naruto made his way along the narrow streets, leaping over rooftops as if they were puddles, barely audibly brushing the tiles. And so he stood before the main gates leading to the house of the head of the Hyuga clan. Naruto-san? Are you here on some mission from the Hokage? A male voice inquired from behind Uzumaki. The blonde blushed sharply and began to deny it. No, I was just passing by, thought I'd stop by to say hello, the boy blurted out, laughing awkwardly, trying not to even look at his interlocutor, who was staring at Uzumaki with his Byakugan in confusion. Say hello? To whom? Are you here to see Lord Hayashi? A brown-haired man named Ko asked, putting Naruto in an even more awkward position. This man usually helped the princess of the Hyuga clan, so he seemed somehow familiar to the blonde. Oh, no, don't get me wrong. Uzumaki blurted out, waving his arms, trying to stave off his execution at Hayashi's hands. I'd like to see Hinata, if that's possible, of course, he mumbled, no longer expecting a positive outcome from this conversation. Hinata was a busy person, after all, and the daughter of a clan head, and not just any clan, but the Hyuga clan. He certainly wouldn't reach her level, despite the fact that he himself had already been dubbed the hero of the village, but his position was somewhat lower, and he hadn't yet reached the level of Jonin. Ko's expression softened slightly, opened the tall door, and invited the blonde to enter. Come in. Does Hinata-sama know you're here? Hyuga inquired, then looked at the hero of the village with a skeptical expression. Nano, I'd like to see her. It won't be long, I promise. The blonde, following all the rules of propriety, folded his hands in a supplicating gesture and bowed deeply. Waiting for Naruto's answer, he was so tense that a drop of sweat fell from his temple and landed on the dusty ground, followed by another. Uzumaki suddenly felt heat rush to his ears, then to his cheeks, and his entire dark face was flushed with shame and embarrassment. Ko only imperceptibly raised the corners of his lips and raised his eyebrows in pleasant surprise. He'd seen him so serious during battles, and now, in front of him, the blonde seemed completely downtrodden and awkward, even though Naruto was taller and bigger than him. I'll talk to Hinata-sama and warn you of your arrival. Really? Uzumaki became animated, grabbing Hyuga's hands, radiating genuine relief and joy. Ko quickly looked away and yanked his hand from the Jinchuriki's dark, rough fingers. Yes, wait for her over there. The brown-haired man nodded toward a bench in the shade of a huge old tree growing in the corner of the courtyard, and quickly took his leave. Uzumaki sat still for a long time, until his legs, tailbone, and anywhere else he could think of went numb. Naruto's eyebrow began to twitch nervously, his leg tapped an unintelligible rhythm, and his ears continued to burn. This last part bothered him the most. He removed his forehead protector and looked at his reflection, tugging at a shaggy lock of blonde hair and trying to smooth it down. Uzumaki carefully checked to make sure nothing was sticking out more than necessary, also checking to see if his mouth was clean after the ramen, and rolled up the sleeves of his orange hoodie to make his newly regenerated arm, made of Hashirama cells and covered in a thick layer of bandages, look more masculine. Naruto didn't know what he would say to Hinata when he saw her, but he knew he owed her thanks for everything she had done for him. The image of the brunette, flying out of nowhere like a mad bird, flashed through his mind, her words and her desperate resistance to Nagato's forces, her hand that had given him courage and confidence during the war. Her silver eyes and shock of long black hair were so ingrained in his memory that they seemed like an all-too-real genjutsu, impossible to shake. Lately, this image had been creeping into his dreams too often, becoming so persistent that Naruto's own feet led him here. The thought that she had said she loved him was especially haunting. Naruto couldn't understand what those words meant. Could Hinata really like someone like him, like that same Uzumaki who was sometimes silly, sometimes stubborn, always loud, and seemed more like a boy than a serious-minded man? Naruto shook his head, trying to push thoughts of Hinata away. He felt his cheeks begin to flush, and even the cool shade couldn't help. He sprawled hopelessly on the bench, his hands behind his head, watching the sun sparkle in the canopy of bright green leaves. Having heard such unexpectedly pleasant and exciting news about the uninvited guest, Hinata couldn't believe her ears. She paced the room, wondering what she should do. She glanced out the window and saw Uzumaki on a bench almost directly beneath her own. She darted away from the window, lest Naruto even catch a glimpse of her shadow. She didn't know what she was afraid of, but her legs wouldn't obey her. Her heart sank for a moment, and then it seemed to skip a beat and roll head over heels. The Hyuga patted her flushed cheeks, grabbed the mirror, and began to scan for even the most subtle imperfections, like the small dark circles under her eyes, the whitish spiderwebs of scars left over from training and missions, and her pale lips. The brunette dumped all her makeup on the bed, quickly covered her bruises, touched up her lips, and ran a brush through her silky, yet still tangled, hair. The entire contents of the closet were also heedlessly dumped on the bed. The Hyuga chose the pink skirt she'd always wanted to wear for Naruto-kun, even if she'd never admitted it to herself, and tied her hair with a rubber band at the very ends, just like Niji always did. For some reason, it had become a habit since his death, a sign of appreciation and gratitude. Hinata ran out of the house and froze on the threshold, unsure how to proceed or how to calm her heart. It seemed to her as if the pounding could be heard far beyond her ribcage. It was like the pinnacle of her dreams. Pensively stroking the cool breeze with his hand, examining every leaf on the old tree, Uzumaki seemed so unattainable to her, yet he was only a dozen steps away. The hem of her long skirt flew up, along with the leaf that slipped from the boy's palm. Their eyes finally met. Naruto instantly jumped up and nearly tripped in surprise. That very image was now reality, not the fantasy of the blonde's overwrought mind. Her jet black hair was scattered over her shoulders, slender fingers tucked it timidly behind her ear. Her eyes darted around, searching for something to hold on to, lest they suddenly encounter the blonde's piercing gaze again. The boy dared to come as close as his frantic heart would allow. For some reason, he wanted to get close enough to examine every crack on the brunette's lips, but he didn't dare. His legs felt so weak that Uzumaki froze after only a couple of steps. The brunette covered the next 5 herself, raising a questioning finger to her chin. "Hinata, the boy began, stumbling over the letters. "Naruto-kun, were you looking for me? Sorry it took so long, but did you have something to do? Maybe Kakashi-sama called," a worried girl's voice babbled. Hinata couldn't quite believe that Uzumaki had come to her without any reason and was now so anxiously awaiting a response in her eyes. "Oh, no, it's me, personally." The blonde-haired man babbled, trying to form coherent statements. Then, gathering his thoughts into a single coherent sentence, he blurted out, "I wanted to talk to you, maybe we could go for a walk. I'll treat you to ramen," as if he hadn't just been to his favorite Ichiraku and his clothes weren't permeated with the aromatic, spiced broth. The brunette sensed this and smiled faintly. Uzumaki wasn't expecting anything, but Hyuga lowered her lush eyelashes, grabbed his orange hoodie with her fingers, and tugged him by the sleeve toward the gate. The young man smiled awkwardly and followed his friend. He was incredibly happy with such a gesture from Hinata. After a few steps, Naruto's gaze slid to the girl's hand, which she had inadvertently forgotten to remove from her soft sleeve. Noticing this, Hyuga quietly apologized and pulled her hand back. Silence hung in the air for a moment. Uzumaki felt the situation was growing tense, the air seemed to be burning out, making it difficult to breathe properly. He still couldn't understand why it was so hard to speak. They struck his teeth with a mental rush and left his lips in a strange moan. Jinchuriki loosened his collar and began to tug at his hoodie to cool down a bit. His entire demeanor revealed how uncomfortable he was. All this made the girl next to him race through all sorts of thoughts. She couldn't even imagine what the blonde man would say to her. "Hinata, you know," Naruto said, clearing his throat slightly, glancing warily at his companion, "I've been wanting to thank you for a long time." Finally, his thoughts came together and the words flowed freely. "I've never really thanked you for everything you've done for me. I never realized how significant all this was." "Naruto-kun, there's no need to thank me at all. Everyone in this village is willing to do anything to help you," she interrupted him with a smile. Uzumaki drew his thick, light eyebrows together and scratched the back of his head meaningfully, tilting his forehead protector, making his whole appearance seem less serious and more confused. "No, I wasn't talking about what anyone could give me," the blonde insisted, emphasizing his logic. Silence fell again, and the irritating heat began to creep up her dark cheeks with renewed vigor. At the crossroads, Uzumaki glanced back, awkwardly grabbed the girl by the elbow, and led her to a place where there were as few prying eyes as possible. The young man had never felt so agitated. The road led the pair to a training ground, fenced off with chain-link fencing. Onlookers certainly couldn't just show up here. The sun glinted off the sand through the dense foliage of the towering trees, their bark covered right to the very tops with notches and inscriptions carved by the shinobi who came here to train. Hinata lovingly traced a notch on the tree, recalling the old days when she'd trained here with Team 8. A strand of jet black hair slipped from behind her ear, seeming to spill like ink in the sunlight. Catching the moment, the blonde's lips parted in silent admiration. Now the girl before him shone brighter than ever. "I love this place," the brunette said, breaking the silence, bestowing another warm smile on Uzumaki. "It reminds me how strongly we're all willing to protect what's dear to us. Willing to beat our hands until they bleed, becoming stronger." Naruto cast a nostalgic glance around the training grounds. It was here that he'd once told Hinata that he admired people like her, strong and persistent, those who never gave up. He latched onto the word "like," trying to grasp its full meaning. His heart suddenly sank. He looked at Hinata again. Now the word "like" seemed to have taken on a form. This form had slender wrists, an elegant smile, lush eyelashes, raven black hair, and a deep, piercing gaze straight into the soul, straight into the heart, piercing defeat. "Yes, and no war can take away this will of fire. But, you know, I realized I wouldn't have achieved all this without you," Naruto said measuredly, sitting cross-legged on the grass, his gaze incinerating the pebble lying near the hem of the kunoichi's soft pink skirt, so as not to stumble upon even her lush eyelashes, let alone her eyes. Hyuga sat under the tree opposite, weaving a wreath from the purple aconite that filled this part of the training grounds, the least affected by training. She couldn't help the flush that burned brightly on her cheeks, stark against her pale skin. She felt as if her fingers might inadvertently break the thick aconite wreath, the poisonous strands crunched slightly when she bent them. Hinata hesitated and hoped Uzumaki would continue speaking, but the blonde hesitated, scratching the back of his head with a smile. It seemed as if he'd already scratched it until it bled from nervousness. He laughed awkwardly. "Come on, tell her everything you wanted," he scolded himself for the sudden shyness and awkwardness. Naruto clenched his bandaged hand tightly into a fist, once again daring to speak. "A long time ago, you were the first to believe in me," he began, looking confidently into the brunette's eyes. "I thought only Master Iruka was on my side when I was a child. I saw the way you looked at me, but I never noticed you. Only recently did it dawn on me what a fool I am." Uzumaki laughed, his whole appearance apologizing to the girl across from him. She stopped weaving her wreath. "Naruto-kun," flew from her lips and disappeared into the grass. "It's my fault for being weak and quiet and only able to watch from the sidelines. Now I'm much more confident thanks to you." With these words, Hyuga picked up the almost finished wreath and, squinting one eye, looked through it at the one who made her heart beat so hard, as if trying on her creation on this soft, tousled hair. "Well, I helped you, and you helped me, but, alas, it occurs to me too late." With these words, the boy pounded his fist on his tousled head, and then continued, "When there was a battle with pain, you were already stronger than me. You believed in me even when I was almost ready to give up. And that was none other than you, Hinata. I wanted you to know this, thank you for everything." After these words, the heaviness in her chest began to subside and her heart, thundering from the unknown, began to calm its pounding. "I'll always be there when you need me." She didn't even have time to finish. "Right now," the blonde blurted out, jumping up from the grass, holding out his hand to his friend, helping her up. "I promised you ramen, let's go." Uzumaki was happy with just one thought. Now she knew that she hadn't been looking at him for nothing. They had a lot in common, and with each passing minute, the blonde felt the bond with this very girl becoming something unbreakable and intimate. Commentary on Part 1, the one who means so much. Guys, if you're interested, let me know with your comments that my writing isn't in vain, so I know who to write the next chapter for. Part 2, Brighter Than the Moon. The small restaurant smelled of hospitality and, of course, hot ramen. "Hiro. Are you only going to eat ramen today?" the owner joked welcomingly, smiling broadly as usual. Glancing at the hyuga next to his favorite customer, he added, "If you finally have a date, I'll give you a good discount." The blonde blushed so much it seemed as if paprika had been sprinkled across his cheeks at those words. He hesitated and smiled awkwardly, but he didn't want to deny the fact of the date. He glanced furtively at Hinata, worried about her reaction. But the girl seemed unfazed by the owner's statement. The kunoichi merely smiled politely. After all, the blood of a noble clan prevented her from displaying unnecessary emotions in public. No one could have imagined that at that moment, the brunette's heartbeat was pleasantly quickening. The tension in the air felt as if the space had burned out and filled with powerful chakra, preventing him from breathing or moving freely. Uzumaki clumsily placed a piece of pork from his bowl into the girl's ramen, considering 1,000 possible thoughts she might have about him at that moment, averting his gaze and muttering an unintelligible, "Well, I thought you liked meat in your noodles more." Hinata found this amusingly sweet, and in return, she gave him her Naruto. Their first, nerve-wracking date passed in awkward silence, punctuated by the occasional silly joke, to which the girl, following all the rules of propriety, responded with a perhaps insincere laugh, but a sweet smile graced the blonde every minute. At some point, the conversation convolutedly devolved into a ton of shared memories, letting the couple know just how close they truly were. Trying to project the impression of a true gentleman, Uzumaki paid for dinner. Having thanked the owner, the couple leisurely left the restaurant and wandered along the busy street deeper into the Konoha courtyards, where curious eyes glued to the local hero were significantly fewer. Hinata seemed to float a centimeter above the ground, gliding with a cat-like gait slightly ahead of the boy to hide her lingering awkwardness and embarrassment. Watching his beloved kunoichi leave, Naruto realized that everything within him was already burning with the desire to touch her, to feel the softness of her skin with his rough fingers, the rough strands of her inky black hair, the whisper of her breath. The blonde hesitantly extended his left hand toward the hyugas. "Hinata," the word fluttered in the air, escaping from dry lips. "Yes?" The brunette turned, her moon-colored Byakugan flashing in the lantern light, her mouth slightly open in surprise, her eyebrows raised. The taut cord of nerves snapped with a clang and a roar, creating an all-consuming roar in Uzumaki's ears. He could no longer hear himself. The adrenaline was pumping harder than in any mortal combat. The next second, he touched the girl's slender porcelain wrist, ran his fingers over the soft, cool skin, and wrapped his palm around hers, locking it. At that very moment, a huge, warm wave of intense tremors coursed through Hinata, spreading through the blonde's body like a reciprocal current. This was the moment, the one cherished, sacred one. One that had never yet existed in his overly eventful life. "I love you," suddenly exploded in the kunoichi's eardrums. Uzumaki insistently demanded an answer with his sapphire eyes, trying not to even blink for that moment. The dumbfounded hyuga tried to dart left and right, but to no avail. The blonde's hands held her firmly, and her own legs wouldn't obey her. She didn't know why she suddenly wanted to hide for a moment. Perhaps because she herself wouldn't have had the courage in such a situation. Hinata's usually almost sickly pale face was now flushed. "Naruto-kun. I love you very much, Hinata." The girl silently lowered her fluffy eyelashes, drew her eyebrows together, tried to exhale to calm her nerves, but couldn't. Naruto simply scooped her up in his strong, rough arms and pressed her to his warm chest. She heard a loud heartbeat against her. "You embarrass me so much. But I will always be with you." The blonde's joy knew no bounds after these words. He was ready to jump to the moon or even higher. Unable to control his euphoria, he blurted out something he hadn't expected from himself. "Hinata, I will ask your father for your hand in marriage when he deems me worthy." Hinata only cried with happiness in response, nodding, her nose buried in Uzumaki's favorite yarn. For so many years, she had tried to be his best, his first, his most important, and now he, that same foolish blonde who had become a hero, was asking for her hand. Maybe it's too early, but... After she dropped these words, her lips lightly brushed the blonde's hot cheek. Uzumaki grabbed her chin with his fingers and, awkwardly, slightly off target, pressed his hot lips to hers. The awkward first kiss, with a couple of unnecessary movements, eased the emotional tension between them, after which they both laughed. The awkwardness gradually faded, and Uzumaki's grip on his future bride's hand tightened. "Naruto, look, the moon is unusually bright today," Hyuga said, pointing with a slender finger to the cloudless sky, where a large, shining moonlit saucer sank into the vast sea of stars. The blonde followed the finger's path to the stars and returned his gaze to Hinata's Byakugan, which, in his opinion, reflected everything 100 times more beautifully than the moon. "Your eyes are brighter." With each passing day, Naruto tried harder to please Hayashi, with varying success. As a shinobi, Uzumaki was wonderful, but as his beloved daughter's boyfriend, he constantly irritated him in many ways. Shaggy, unkempt, disheveled, he'd shake his hand the wrong way, walk home at the wrong time, or sneak through the window at night. However, the old man's heart saw boundless confidence in his choice in his daughter's gaze. Hayashi drank tea in silence for a long time while training the younger generation, perhaps reconsidering many things a dozen more times, and with a clear conscience gave his blessing.